Okay, welcome to A Phrase at a Time. I'm Andy. We're going to talk about a quote from the 35th President of the United States today. And the quote is this one. He said, maybe I'll even use a Massachusetts accent if I can, I'll try it that way. Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Okay, my bad imitation of the late President Kennedy aside, this quote is possibly one of the most famous utterances we can say from a public figure in America. There have been other phrases. I mean, certainly the Gettysburg Address has some phrases in it that are quite well known, and there are a number of other presidents who have said things that are memorable. But this might be one of the most memorable of quotes from President Kennedy. Mind you, to be honest, President Kennedy was probably one of the greatest orators in the 20th century, maybe the greatest orator of the 20th century, although probably Churchill would give him a run for his money. But both of them were quite eloquent. President Kennedy sounded very, how can we say it, almost melodious with the Massachusetts accent, which I didn't do a very good imitation of, I'm sorry. But nonetheless, he had he had a flow to his words and almost a cadence when he spoke. I remember I used to listen to his speeches when I was a little boy. Not him speaking them, of course. I was too young for that. I was born in 1962. Kennedy was assassinated in 1963, so I would have only been a year old. But I used to listen to taped recordings of some of his speeches. And when you listen to him, it's like there's a melody that the words are almost, we could say, musical. It's actually very beautiful speaking. So that was part of his attraction, but also, of course, the things that he said, many of the things that he said were quite profound, and I would say this is probably one of the profound quotes out there. So this came from his, Kennedy, by the way, again, was the 35th President of the United States. On this particular quote comes from in January 20 of 1961. He took the oath of office as the 35th President and then gave what presidents traditionally give as their inaugural address. So this was a quote from his inaugural address. So the speech itself was actually quite short. It was only 1,355 words, which is not a long speech. As inaugurations go, that's probably one of the shortest ones ever. It's interesting, he apparently told Ted Sorensen, his advisor, that I don't want people to think I'm a windbag. So that was, he actually was worried that if you spoke for too long, people would say, oh, this guy just goes on and on forever. I mean, we don't want to listen to the president who talks for too long and so on. I think he probably realized later people didn't mind listening to him, even when he spoke at some length. But it was inaugural day, and he didn't want to, and also apparently quite cold at that time of year in Washington, D.C., and so he didn't want people to freeze to death either, I guess. Although he did his speech, he took his jacket off and spoke just in a shirt and tie, and without his maybe with his jacket, but without his top coat. Just took the winter protection off because he wanted to sort of project a vigorous, energetic type of persona, which he certainly was. So what this quote is about, if we look at this quote itself and talk about the meaning, is it's interesting because if we have to take this in the context of the times, and the times were that there was, the Cold War was going on between what was the Soviet Union in those days, which was of course dominated by Russia, but it was a series of other countries, but they were all tied together and ran by the Politburo, which basically was a 12-man unit, but was also dominated by one man, by the chairman, and at that time that was Khrushchev. So we can look at the times, and there was just a lot of tension between the former Soviet Union and America, and what we used to call the Eastern Bloc countries, and the democracies of the West. And there was there was a threat of nuclear war. There were a lot of conflicts. There were minor wars that had been going on. The Korean War, the Vietnam War was about to start. It was kind of ongoing from a conflict with the French that then turned into a sort of a diplomatic war with the Americans, and then during the Kennedy administration turned into, of course, the Vietnam War. So there was a lot of this anger between, between the two sides, if you like. And I think with this quote, Kennedy in a way was kind of trying to throw some calm on the waters, trying to settle things down a bit, and trying to get people to be less selfish. And it's interesting because during the Kennedy administration, something started, which still is ongoing today, called the Peace Corps. And I believe the Americans in the Peace Corps initiative are in, I think they're in 40 countries. I might be wrong on that. Somebody will probably correct me in the comments if that's wrong. But I think the way it's 40 countries. But at any rate, the Americans are involved with this Peace Corps initiative, and it's the budget per year, I think, is 400 in 2022. I think it's 480 million. So close to $500 million is spent on these initiatives. And what they do is they go into countries all over the world and have volunteers, and a lot of them are young people. I've taught several and worked with several of the younger people across the years that have been involved in these initiatives. And what they do is they send them into countries that need help, and they get involved in projects like schools, or trying to improve the farming techniques, or trying to reduce carbon emissions or other types of things. But they're involved in these kind of initiatives worldwide, and this was part of Kennedy's whole initiative. Ask not on the selfish side of things. It's not you looking for welfare programs, looking for your country to take care of you, looking for handouts and these types of things. It's what can you do for your country? How can you help? And there's a second part to this that was also in the inaugural speech. And he said, "My fellow citizens of the world." This was in addition. This was like the second part. So he said, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country to the Americans. And then he said, "My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but rather together what we can do for the freedom of man." So in the greater picture, this was this idea that the American spirit, if you like, was to help other countries build themselves into democracies and become sort of more open societies. Now, a lot of people, of course, quarrel with that and say that that's resulted in some problematic, let's just say, American foreign policies. And you could certainly argue that. There's certainly room for discussion on either side. But I think Kennedy's initiative was quite genuine in the sense that he was trying to see this from the point of view of less selfish people in America that will contribute to making America better, and also through the Peace Corps making the world a better place, and following that through citizens in other parts of the world looking to do what they can, in terms of the freedom of mankind. So that's kind of the larger picture of this, if you like. And like I say, the Peace Corps is actually still going strong, and this whole sort of notion of being helpful to others and caring to others, we could probably say is not only part of the American spirit, the positive side of it. And again, I know some people can argue that there's certainly other ways of looking at it. But we're looking at staying on the bright side for now, that the positive spirit, if you like, is this type of thinking. Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country, and also the world by extension. And that's what the Peace Corps was all about. It was more on the worldly scale. So I'll close with a quote which I think fits this idea well. This is from the Bible, and it says, "Whatsoever you do," Jesus said, "to the least of my brothers, that you do unto me." So this idea of helping your fellow citizen in your own country and in other parts of the world as well is what Kennedy was talking about. So we'll close with that for today on a phrase at a time, and I look forward to seeing you on the next video. As always, please like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts down below. Blessings.